Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Square Unboxed session. The topic of this section is managing time with the Bookings API. I'm Matt Dickenson from the Square Appointments team, and I'm here with Richard Moot from our developers team. In this presentation, we'll be talking about the Bookings API. The API has been in public beta since late 2020, and it went GA today as part of Unboxed. In this presentation, we'll give an overview of the design of the API, go through a demo, and then talk about some details that you should know if you're using the API. So first, let's start with a couple of definitions and describe what we mean by a booking. When we say booking, what we mean is an agreement between a customer and a merchant to be fulfilled at a specific time and location. So already with this definition, you should be seeing the names of certain primitives in Square's API ecosystem that you might already be familiar with, such as customer, merchant, and location. The customer is the person who's receiving the services as part of the booking, and the merchant is the one who's providing it. And a really key piece of this definition is about the specific time. So the Bookings API is really all about managing time and abstracting that away and making that really convenient for you as a developer to work with. So we'll talk about how that works as we get further into the presentation. You'll also hear us use the term appointment today. You can think of booking as being that general concept that we talked about on the last slide, and an appointment is a specific type of booking consisting of time segments with services provided by team members. So again, using terms that you may already be familiar with as part of Square's API. In this case, services are items in catalog, and team members are individuals that the merchant has set up as service providers in the Appointments first-party product. We'll go through more about how this works a little bit later. So to get an overview of how the API works, let's look at the most common endpoints that you as a developer would be using to build an integration with the API. And these are listed here basically in the order you would call them as part of the booking flow. So you'd begin by searching availability to look for an open time, creating that booking, updating it, doing any kind of management that you need to. In some cases, you may need to cancel. And then at any time, you could retrieve a collection of bookings with the list bookings endpoint. So let's take those one by one and say a little bit more about them. So search availability is the endpoint that you use to find an open time on the merchant's calendar, given filters about the location and the services that a customer wishes to book. Create booking is just what it sounds like. It's when you make that agreement between the customer and the merchant to hold that time for the customer. Update booking would be to make any changes needed along the way, such as a reschedule. Your application could retrieve the booking at any time to check its status, for example. Cancellation is available depending on a merchant's policies, for example, maybe up to 24 hours before the booking starts. And list booking would be for those kind of bulk operations you might need to do on bookings. What features do you get when you integrate this API? As we've been saying already, this API builds on top of a bunch of existing Square APIs for managing locations, team members, customers, and catalog for storing those services. So if you're already familiar with those APIs, that's a great starting point for working with the Bookings API. And if the Bookings API is the first Square API you're working with, it might be beneficial to spend a little bit of time familiarizing yourself with those other Square APIs. And as you've come to expect from working with Square APIs, we provide webhooks. Specifically, anytime a booking is created or updated, your application will receive a webhook event for those. And we have a sandbox environment where you can test out your integration. You can also see what things look like in the first-party product and develop an understanding of how your integration interacts with the first-party product. So speaking of that, what are the first-party features that you can leverage as part of your integration or that you'll be integrating into? We have features both on the customer side of things and on the merchant side. So for customers, the main first-party actions that they take are finding openings when a merchant's available and creating their booking online. Customers also receive reminders along the way, letting them know that their booking is coming up. They can receive those by email or SMS. And if they're receiving those by SMS, they have the option to respond, and we can handle certain interactions there with a chatbot, such as reschedule or cancel for some of those common requests. On the merchant side of things, merchants use Square Appointments to manage their calendar, both their regular hours as well as holiday overrides, and in some cases integrating with Google Calendar to manage personal events so that they're not booked during a time that they have something else going on. Merchants also use Square Appointments to manage their services that they offer, what staff provide those services, and what locations those services are offered at. And then as part of our first-party product, we also have an integration with Square Online where merchants can create a customizable booking site and pull all of these things in from Square's APIs. One thing to note about the Bookings API that's a little bit different from other Square APIs you might have worked with is that we have two permission levels. So on the left, we have permissions that would be appropriate for a demand generation type of integration, where you're driving a lot of customer interaction. So you can think of these as operating on behalf of the customer. And on the right, we have a permission set that is more appropriate for a custom app integration, where the actions you're taking are on behalf of the merchant. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between these. On the demand generation side of things, you'll primarily be searching for availability, finding spots on a merchant's calendar that they could honor a customer's request. You can manage any bookings that your app created, but you won't be able to see or manage bookings created in the first-party product or by other third-party applications. You will be able to receive webhooks for any booking that your app created. Again, those booking created and booking updated webhooks. On the custom app integration side of things, it's more about managing a merchant's full calendar. So with demand generation permissions, we prevent you from doing things like double booking a merchant, and that can be really appropriate if you don't want to accidentally create conflicts on a merchant's calendar. But on the custom app integration side, you own the merchant's calendar. You have access to everything on that calendar, bookings created by your application as well as other applications, including the first-party product, and you can create calendar conflicts. So it's up to you which of these levels of permission is right for your integration, depending on what merchants are asking you to do for them. Again, that overall booking flow is pretty simple. It begins with searching for an available time once the customer's picked the services and location that they're interested in, then creating and managing that booking, and then building your application to consume the webhooks that we emit. So to help us get a better picture of what this looks like, I will turn things over to Richard for a demo.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. So right now I have our bookings example application. You can find this within our developer documentation, which I have over here on the right under Square SDK samples. And you can see that there's a bookings API. So you can go ahead and just visit there, click through, and then clone the application. And then I already have it cloned over here on the left. There's a couple things that you have to set. One thing is you want to copy your env file here and set a couple parameters with what you get out of your developer dashboard, which you can find for your application. And then one other thing that you have to do before you can actually use Bookings API is you actually need to activate the appointments service. We call this onboarding, and you still need to even do this within your Sandbox account. And so down here, I have my Sandbox test accounts. I've already opened one up here. And then we can sort of navigate over to appointments. And then once I have this, so you can see I already have this onboarded. So I've already created some services. So I can actually just go ahead and start the application. I can just run npm start, and then we should have our application up and running. One other thing I do want to mention is that the example application here also has some nice tools for like seeding data in your Sandbox account so that you can easily get this thing up and running. But with a Sandbox seller account, when you actually create these services, it'll automatically create things like staff and bookable services for you. So now that I have this loaded, I can go ahead and go to localhost port 3000, and we can see that we have our application loaded here. So this is to help show exactly what Matt was talking about with what an integration with appointments can look, or with Bookings API can look like. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and pick men's haircut. Here, we're just listing all the different services for this test account. And see, now we have all of our staff. So I'm going to just go actually say, I'll take any available staff. And then here we have a calendar where we can actually pick all of the availabilities. So you can see that this is powered by the search availabilities endpoint to find out all the available appointment slots. So here I'm going to go ahead and pick 9 a.m. on Friday, and then I will go ahead and put in my name. And I will go ahead and click book appointment. And you can see here that I already have my appointment booked. And so we have some other options here. I can sort of said, Friday doesn't actually work for me. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Monday at 11 a.m. And we just went ahead and rebooked it. And then finally, we can also go ahead and cancel the booking. And you can see that all of my events have been triggered over here. And so we were able to successfully manage that through the example app. If you want more details, again, I highly encourage you to go clone the app and run it yourself to get familiar with this. But with that, let's go ahead back to Matt and walk through some of these endpoints.
Thanks, Richard. Now we'll take a look under the hood at some of the requests and responses that were powering that demo. So to begin, we have a search availability request. And if you're familiar with other search endpoints in Square's API, the overall structure of this should look pretty familiar. We have a query and a filter. And the specific filters you can have are a range of acceptable start times for the booking, the business location that the customer wishes to book at, and then filters for those services that they want. So these are catalog IDs of those services, as well as a filter on which team members can perform those services. So in some cases, a customer might have one particular individual that they want to perform that service, or a list of a couple people who would be acceptable. And in other cases, they might say any staff member who's available at this time would be fine. So you can specify all of those things in your search availability request. As a response to that request, you'll get back a list of availabilities. So these have a start time, the location that was specified in the request, and a list of segments on the appointment for each service. Each segment has a duration, the team member who can perform it at that time, and the service ID and version, again, relating back to the catalog object in question. So if you look at these availabilities, one thing to notice as we go to the next slide is that a create booking request takes one of these availabilities and just adds a customer ID to it. So all the same things that you see here, start time, location, and appointment segments, are also present here on the create booking request. So it should be really straightforward for your application to take an available time and book it for a customer. Once you issue that create booking request, you'll get a response that has the same overall booking structure with the addition of an identifier, a version for that booking, and a status. An appointment starts in either a pending or an accepted status, depending on the merchant's settings. So some merchants automatically accept all appointments, and others put the appointment into a pending state initially and then review it. If it is in that pending state, the best way for your application to watch for the merchant to accept it is by consuming webhooks. So our webhooks look like this. They have a booking inside, and then on the outer structure, they have the identifier of the merchant in question and which type of event this is, either booking created or booking updated. So again, your application consuming those is the best way to watch for changes on a merchant's calendar. A couple of key details before we turn things over to Q&A. The first, you might be wondering, what are the biggest feature gaps here compared to other parts of our API? And the biggest thing that's not available today is an integration with our orders and payments APIs. So you won't be able to access order information related to a booking, and you won't be able to pay for it in the API yet, but stay tuned for updates along these lines. That's our prepared material today, and we will now turn things over for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I'll go ahead and read off this first question from Donald Hansen. He says, hello, This may be more of a business question, but how do you set up accepting fees on behalf of a seller? Also, how do you specify which Square account are in play for both the developers and the seller? Thanks. It's a great question, Donald. I think what you're referring to as is the OAuth process. I can see that Shannon Skipper already answered in the chat there and linked a video. So anybody else who's curious about how to integrate OAuth or some of the best practices, we've created a video that's on our YouTube channel that can walk you through how to actually implement the entire OAuth process. And that's actually pretty important for what Matt mentioned earlier about the different permission levels, depending on if you want to have these demand gen style permissions or these full, seller access permissions. And so that's actually the way that you would sort of understand this relationship between a developer account and a seller account. As far as answering your question on setting up accepting fees on behalf of a seller, that's not necessarily in the context of Bookings API, but if you are wanting to accept fees on behalf of the seller, you would have to go through that OAuth process first. And then there's a feature on the Payments API for app fee money that allows you to be able to, on a per transaction basis, extract like a certain percentage fee or a fixed amount. So I hope that answers your question, and please do check out that video that Shannon already shared with you. I'll go ahead and read the next question. The next question is from Jorge, and it says, "Hi guys, do you know when we could be able to book items?"
So I think there's two answers depending on what you have in mind with this question. The first, any service that you saw us booking in the demo, those are currently catalog items of a specific type called an appointment service. So that integration already exists. What you might be referring to is the ability to book time in the absence of a staff member. We sometimes talk about this as like a resource reservation for something like a kayak or a bike rental or something like that. If that's what you have in mind, we don't currently offer staffless booking, but we do see merchants sometimes use things creatively and set up things that we would normally think of as an inanimate object as a staff member, for example. We see lots of creativity in the way that merchants use appointments, and that might be something here. But the idea around just generally bookable items is definitely something we can think about how to incorporate best into our roadmap, and we will keep the developer community updated as we do that.
Great. And one thing I would definitely recommend is going to our forums. If this is kind of functionality that you would like to be native to the Bookings API, please go ahead and share that with us there. I would caveat that there are very creative solutions that developers have come up with up to now, but I would give a little bit of caution to going that path, because then when it's eventually introduced natively, you would have to do the migration at that point. And so we just want to be sure that you wouldn't be in a situation where you'd end up having to break yourself to do that migration. Great. Next question is from Joey. It says, more of a feature question, but does Square have any plans to build out a reservation system for restaurants? I looked into making that happen with a booking API, but it doesn't quite seem built for that purpose.
Yeah, so this is a good question. During COVID, we have seen some Square Restaurants merchants begin to use appointments as a way of managing the reservation system. It's not supported natively in the API today in the way that Richard was just talking about, but that is something we could think about making more of a native interaction, and we will definitely share updates when we have something to announce there.
Great. And then we have one more question from Bin that says, do custom app integrations receive all webhook events on behalf of the seller?
Thanks for that question, Ben. A custom app integration would receive the booking created and the booking updated webhooks for any booking that is created for that seller. So it could be one created by your application in the first-party product, or by another third-party API. So yes, you would receive those webhook events for all bookings.
And to also add to that, to sort of answer more broadly, is that any merchant that you've OAuth through to your application, you would receive webhook events for them through onto your application as long as you've registered your webhook. And for those particular types of events, those will be routed so you've received them at your webhook URL. Great questions. We want to give maybe a little bit more time for some folks to ask some questions before we wrap things up. But so far, it seems like we might not be getting any more trickling in. So while we're waiting, I would like to thank all of you for being here and attending and watching this and asking us such great questions. If you plan on building with the Bookings API, we would love to learn about it. We have a Slack community that you can go and join. I'm going to probably just ask that Shannon Skipper could probably share a link to how you find that. If you can't find it there, it's pretty easy to find through our documentation. Also, another great place to share this is in the forums. And then the final thing that I want to reference is our hackathon that we announced. If you actually build a new application or extend your existing application with Bookings API, you can actually submit it as part of the hackathon and be eligible to win up to $20,000. Well, with that, it seems like we don't have any additional questions. So I'll let you sort of sign off here, Matt.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.